4 consecutive losses to the Liberal Party, I think it's time for them to do some soul searching, and I hope they do.
Well, we've got some election aftermath. Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David. Today we are having Tim Houston and Doug Ford both pulling out the daggers and pointing them at Pierre Poilievre. These crumb snatchers are going for his job. Tim Houston in a press conference, backtracking some of his remarks, tail between his legs. The man should not have opened his mouth because now I'm going to expose the net zero garbage he's involved in. Let's jump into this. Got this one here. It says Pierre won the student vote. The next generation is conservative, 36% versus Carney's 32%. Students voting for Carney, it's like just throwing your future away. We got Mark Nixon posting this one. We could have elected a government that promised no summer break until key laws were passed. That's what Pierre Poilievre was talking about, doing what's right for the people, as he says here, including affordability and the Jobs Acts, and said Parliament is going on a holiday, but don't worry, they'll fight hard to make life affordable after vacation. Let's just take a look at the calendar here. So they'll be back on the 26th of May, which is basically a month from now. They'll be there for all of 4 weeks, then they go on break for another 100 days. Like, these people are so lazy. Just enough time to jack up the industrial carbon tax, maybe make a few deals that enriches Brookfield, that kind of thing. Next up, we got Chris Stacey and Right Blend on the scene. That's right, these guys are there, grilling Mark Carney day one.
Mr. Carney, you ran a fear-based campaign focused on Trump, elbows up. Practice that line? I did, actually.
Well,
did you practice that line? Mark Carney's such a smug monkey.
Why does Trump prefer you over Pierre Poilievre? Why does Trump say he hates you less? Are you going to slow walk a by-election in Pierre Poilievre if he chooses to run in Alberta?
Do you think walking the independent media, the only people here questioning you, is a good...
The job of the press is to hold our leaders accountable, sir, and we will do that. Thank you. Looking forward to seeing you again soon. Bye now.
Look forward to our next meeting, Mr. Carney.
Well done, boys. So Mark Carney, you're going to get more from him right now because he hasn't been doing this for 10 years like Trudeau. Trudeau at the end, he just give his little smug wave and a smile. But Carney's not burnt out, so definitely grill him any chance you have because you will get more from him right now. He's going to get annihilated in the House of Commons question period. You bet he is. Pierre Poilievre is the all-star there, but there's plenty of guys who can drop the hammer on him. Like Jamil Javani, I can see him going to rip that guy a new one. Hopefully he gets a shot at that. Michael Barrett, Andrew Scheer. Mark Carney doesn't know what's going to hit him here in a month. Got this one from Barbara Ball. So they're going around and collecting all their signs. This is just sad. They're having to find their signs because they were all stolen and disposed of the day of the election. These are dirty tactics. At the start of this campaign too, we saw the Liberals were caught stealing these and stealing the posts themselves. There needs to be charges laid for this kind of stuff. What happened to honesty, integrity? Next up on CTV Power Play, we've got Vasi talking with Andrew Scheer here about the future of the party, Pierre Poilievre, the whole situation.
Clearly, we need to think about a few things about how we fell short and why we fell. No one's here denying that. And my message to those 8 million plus, or around 8 million, I haven't done a recent check, but about 8 million people who voted Conservative, hoping for that change. My message is, we get that there's disappointment. We get that we need to figure something else out to win next time. We're not taking that for granted. No one's saying here, that we don't have some work to do to figure that out. But there's an incredible base of support that only Pierre Poilievre could have done for our party, and he's the only person that can continue that and finish the job.
Will he run in a by-election? I mean, I know the government will call the by-election, but is it someone going to step aside in like a so-called safe seat? Like, has that decision been made?
Look, these are early days. It's 2 days after the election. It's something that we'll be addressing going forward. But I can tell you that Pierre is staying on. He's fighting. He's gonna work with our caucus. He's gonna work with our loyal volunteers and our activists to keep the momentum going. And I am very confident that as we get through the difficult days, the next days and weeks, as we figure some of these things out, we're gonna come out the other side with a more united team, with a bigger team, with more representation from more provinces, and Pierre is the man to deliver that victory in the next election.
In the meantime, while he's not in the House, will you be leading the party in the House? Still not decided. Okay. Sure. Had to check.
The answer is yes. He'll be leading the party. That's my guess. And Pierre will be getting a seat. Not sure where yet. The only Canadian politician who could get 15,000 people out to his rally, and Liberals think they should get rid of him. The Liberals are trying so desperately to paint this narrative. They don't want him there because they're afraid of him. And that's what we're seeing here with this. Andrew Scheer widely expected to lead the Conservatives in the House of Commons, which opens next month. He was a previous leader and he's been a House Speaker, so it's the obvious choice. That's why he goes on CTV Power Play. Pierre Poilievre trusts him to do that. Be the best best voice of the party. Michael Barrett too often does that. So here's a perfect example of we got David Cochrane just trying to take shots at Pierre Poilievre. They desperately want him to step down because he's the guy who got 15,000 people out to a rally. Numerous rallies with thousands and thousands of people, much more than Justin Trudeau.
To stick to someone here, and I think Pierre's the guy. Okay, but if you stick with the leader, do you stick with the leadership style? Because I don't think it's helpful to be fighting with Doug Ford. I don't think it's helpful to be fighting with Tim Houston. You've been at war with the Parliamentary Press Gallery, calling people liars because they get subsidies. Not you, I want to make that very clear. But this has been a thing that, because I work for the CBC.
I call them liars. I'll take credit for that because David Cochrane is a liar. So is Rosemary Barton and a whole bunch of these fools.
And we get government money, we're going to lie for the government.
You do lie for the government, though, over and over and over.
It just creates all of these fractions and tensions and makes people question, the seriousness of things. So what needs to change in the approach and style of the party if you're going to keep Mr. Poilievre and make an even bigger breakthrough?
So that's where the clip ends. But they want to get rid of Poilievre desperately. They're scared of him. They are terrified of him. All this blow up with Doug Ford. So I showed this clip yesterday, Doug Ford blasting Pierre. And I showed that campaign tent where Pierre Poilievre was a part of it. They're using his imagery to help Doug Ford get elected.
A federal election. Last time I checked, Pierre Poilievre never came out in our election. Matter of fact, him or one of his lieutenants told every one of his members, don't you dare go out and help the PCs. Isn't that ironic?
So that's not what happened, but we know that because Doug Ford's a liar. As we see here with this and Poilievre's face right on here, this was brought up by Goldie Gamari here, who didn't like Doug Ford's take on that. Doug Ford is lying about Pierre not helping. This is directly coming from this PC candidate. Doug Ford has always been a liar. So next up, regarding Tim Houston, this whole situation here, it says Nova Scotia Premier openly working with Carney distances himself from Poilievre. And I'm going to show you why here. But first off, Table Salt summed it up here. Tim Houston, Premier of Nova Scotia, completely retreats from his tough guy leadership coup for the CPC, trying to take out Poilievre. Houston snubbed Poilievre and released a leadership video while Poilievre was in Nova Scotia and down in the polls, never forget. So he released this video just like Doug Ford, trying to come out here and snake his way in. This is not going to work, Tim Houston. I'm sorry, buddy, but I'm going to have to expose you today.
And I'm just wondering if we could go back to the comments you made about the Conservative Party of Canada and soul searching. You've always branded yourself as more of a red Tory. Is that what you would like to see them, the direction you'd like to see them move into?
Look, I think there are many shades of blue, and it can be a big tent and it can be an effective big tent. And I think that after 4 consecutive losses to the Liberal Party, I think it's time for them to do some soul searching, and I hope they do.
You think from their...
That's ridiculous. He knows full well that Donald Trump just came in. It turned the whole situation upside down. Nobody knew how to handle the situation. Mark Carney and the Liberals fear-mongered, snaked out a win, and this guy is turning his back on Conservatives.
There are lessons they could have taken from your election win in the fall, maybe that they didn't take?
I think our election campaign was pretty successful. I do think Doug Ford's re-election campaign was pretty successful too.
This guy pumping Doug Ford's tires and himself. These guys were riding Poilievre's high, and now they're turning on him. This is ugly stuff.
So, for me personally, I always say for issues we face as a province or whatever the case may be, we don't have to create the wheel. We can learn from others. We can work with others. I think there was opportunities for them to reach out and learn and work with others. They decided not to. That's their choice.
Well, first off, I just showed that Pierre Poilievre lended his support to Doug Ford to help him get reelected. It came from the Carleton riding of that provincial MP. Notice that both of them that have come out and are attacking Poilievre are both the red Tories, essentially they're liberals. Maybe that's because if we go to my board here, we can see Tim Houston has a project that directly aligns with Mark Carney's vision. Is Tim Houston really a conservative or is he a liberal? What we're talking about here today is Enerwind Fuels. Real quick, I keep interchanging the words Everwinds and Enerwinds. The company's name is Everwinds Fuels. Enerwind Fuels is a green hydrogen project. It's wind turbines. It's a big scam is what it is, which is what we see here from the Halifax Examiner. Green hydrogen is a gargantuan scam. Now, how does this work? It says this ridiculous scheme calls for building a bunch of windmills to produce power, but not to replace coal-fired power plants that we now use. That would be too sensible. Instead, the power produced by the windmills would be used to make green hydrogen, which then would be super cooled in liquefied gas and placed in tankers and shipped across the ocean to Germany, where it would then be heated back up and placed in those old methane pipes, and voila, green energy. The whole process is only 20% efficient. So the reason for Germany here, I skipped over that. Germany has a need for this. They were trying to do this themselves, but it had to be subsidized by the government. It's a scam. It talks here about the methane industry. Well, now people see that burning methane isn't such a great plan, and then Russia blocked shipments to Europe, and Ukrainian spies blew up the North Sea pipeline, and that gave the billionaires the opportunity to pounce. Why not replace that methane being burned in Germany with hydrogen? And we could make that hydrogen with renewable power, and it would all be green. Germany could, of course, spin its old windmills and create its own green hydrogen, but that was too expensive. So instead of using locally produced green hydrogen, the billionaires planned a convoluted international market in green hydrogen. So let's break down this relationship a bit. Trent Vici owns Everwind Fuels. He's the guy who's meeting with Tim Houston in these private meetings. They're not talking about what's in their meetings. This is all to force green hydrogen on the people of Nova Scotia. Atlantic Canada would be told that their wind was better than the wind in Germany, and they would all feel good about their world-class wind and the promised jobs. Goes on to say here, none of this works unless there are enormous public subsidies. Subsidies from the German government, subsidies from the Canadian government, subsidies from the Nova Scotian and Newfoundland governments. Who's standing in the middle of all those subsidies? That's right, those billionaires. It's laughable that the billionaires are supposedly bringing us this new green economy are the very same billionaires who ferry about in their pollution-belching super yachts and fly hither and thither in private jets. Sounds like Mark Carney, doesn't it? We jump over to this article here. It says, obviously dishonest. Premier Tim Houston repeatedly met with green hydrogen investor Trent Vici, then failed to properly file his expense claims, obscuring those meetings. If we scroll down here, it says, in addition to provincial support, Vici's company has received $187.5 million in financing from the federal government, including $165 million from Export Development Canada and $22.5 million from Transport Canada's Green Shipping Corridor program. Here the expense report's pretty light. There's no records of what they talked about. It goes on to talk about these guys meeting in the hundreds of millions of dollars. It says Houston told the Halifax Examiner that he did indeed dine with Trent Vici in New York in March this year. That does not show up in the travel expense documents released. They had dinner at 7 p.m. and then supper at 9 p.m. Not only did they meet, they met in his Manhattan apartment on several occasions. These trips raise all sorts of questions, from those regarding policy, what was discussed, nothing was written there, there's no written correspondence, also to the mundane. Is Houston simply using visits with Vici as a reason for the public to finance his visits with his daughter in New York? It raises issues of transparency. Goes on to say Bearhead and Everwind Fuels hydrogen development will require as many as 600 onshore turbines across northern Nova Scotia. This is another green grifting program. That's all this is. And this directly aligns with Mark Carney's agenda. See, what happens is they create green hydrogen, which is only 20% efficient. They can send it over to Germany and sell it. It has to be subsidized by the government. Being a green energy source, it would be CBAM compliant. If you saw that video, this is the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. This is the program that's already in the place in the UK. They're ramping this up, forcing companies to be in line with net zero, eco and green. If you're not, you gotta pay for, that's right, carbon credits. And guess who's the world leader in carbon credits? That's right, it's Brookfield Asset Management. And who has 7 million stock options in Brookfield Asset Management? That's right, it's Mark Carney, our prime minister. Is this a massive conflict of interest? You bet it is. That's why Tim Houston is all chummy with Mark Carney, because he's helping Mark Carney get rich with this dirty scheme. Is Tim Houston a conservative? No, he's a liberal. This is the reason why he's not chummy with Pierre Poilievre, because Poilievre knows he's a charlatan, just like Doug Ford. What's also interesting about this, that just solidifies all of this. So Trent Vici meets with Tim Houston, green energy, CBAM, all of this. As I mentioned, there was funding from the federal government. Well, who else has met with Trent Vici? That's right, Jonathan Wilkinson. You can see that right on Trent Vici's LinkedIn page. This week, we're honored to host delegation at Point Tupper. That's the location this is happening, following announcement $600 million joint venture, Canada-Germany Hydrogen Alliance. There's the once billionaire, soon to be a billionaire again, Trent Vici meeting with Jonathan Wilkinson. This all plays into Mark Carney's net zero agenda. Tim Houston is a part of this. Tim Houston is a sellout. He's sellout to the people of Nova Scotia. He's a sellout to the Conservative Party. That's why Pierre Poilievre doesn't want to have anything to do with him, and he's trying to come for his job. It's not going to happen. He released a campaign video while Poilievre was visiting there. This guy's a hack. just like Doug Ford. So we've got a whole bunch of articles like this, Montreal Gazette opinion piece. Elections aren't fights for second place. Poilievre has got to go. They're desperately trying to get Pierre Poilievre, as Dan Robertson says here. Please let's stop this madness. A serious party can't have 5 leaders in 10 years. Poilievre is the man for the job. He's lifted this party up. Conservatives are not abandoning Pierre Poilievre. And that's why we're seeing Tim Houston and Doug Ford today taking shots at him, because both those guys are liberals. They're not conservatives. Next up, we got Vasi Kapellos asking the NDP campaign manager here if any NDP are going to be crossing the floor over to the Liberals.
Are you concerned about any of the 7 MPs that were elected as New Democrats being lured over to government to help form a majority?
I am not. I think that I know those 7 people. I've worked with them. They are strong New Democrats. But I also would say, floor crossers are punished in this country. People voted for New Democrats. Anyone who voted New Democrat in this election and elected an NDP MP expects to get an NDP MP. And I think an NDP member of parliament who thought that they could take those voters' wishes for granted and then disappoint them will find that they will be unelected very quickly. But I'm not worried about that. This caucus worked together in some very difficult times through the pandemic and through the last few years, and came together and supported each other. And I think those 7 people that are elected, that's who they are. They're going to continue to work together and support each other.
I'll leave it on.
This government that's been working together, a bunch of buffoons. Doesn't sound like they're going to be crossing the floor. Who knows? We know Jenny Kwan came out and said that she's not going to, so there's 6 of them left. Next up, we've got David Jacobs posting this one. MP Fanjoy, recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel is H word, I can't say that. In 1000 BCE, King David captured Jerusalem, declaring it the capital of Israel. It is confirmed in historical text and archaeological evidence. The only H word on display is an H for 3,000 years of facts. So that's in response to Bruce Fanjoy down here, replying to the CBC tweet of Trump to recognize Jerusalem as capital of Israel, Trump throwing another log on the H fire. Nice start there, Bruce. Next up, we got Kevin O'Leary here, giving his recap on the whole election.
Kevin, let's look forward now. I mean, you brought up the Canadian dollar. Right now, it's liking this news. It's steady. About what's the path forward?
The path forward is to attract capital back to Canada, because it has abandoned Canada over the last decade. And even if you ask, the pension plans in Canada and Canada's sovereign wealth, they don't invest in Canada anymore. Canada's not investable. You just can't get a deal done anymore. And everybody knows that. It's the dirty truth. So unless C-69 is repealed, I think that will remain a problem. Why would anybody trust the government, the same government with C-69 still embedded and carbon taxes still there making the economy uncompetitive? Why would they want to come back when they have so many other alternatives all around the world? And that's the challenge for Carney. If he really wants to build, baby, build, as he said in his acceptance speech, he's got to get rid of C-69, and he's got to at least pause with the carbon taxes to compete with dollars that fly over Canada and go into the United States.
That's not going to happen. He's not going to repeal C-69, and he's not going to get rid of the industrial carbon tax. And he'll bring back the consumer carbon tax. I don't think he's going to do it in the first 6 months. He'll probably wait a year and then say, it's time to catalyze, bring back the carbon tax. We must catalyze. We're in a crisis. He'll do something like that.
Where they get much higher returns in states like Tennessee, Florida, Texas, Oklahoma, North Dakota. These places have become investment friendly with policy that's pro-sovereign wealth. Canada doesn't have that designation. And, if he truly wants to solve that, he's going to have to fix this problem. And I think the opposition, in context of the Conservatives, he's going to have a hell of a time getting a budget done if he keeps telling everybody we're going to ram down carbon taxes on every business in Canada, and I'm going to keep C-69 in place so you can't get any deals done. That's not going to be easy.
Kevin's right. The only thing that's going to happen here is Mark Carney's going to push forward an agenda that enriches Brookfield. And Kevin, baby, you got to get rid of the red glasses. Mr. Wonderful, I believe it is not the intention of the Carney Liberals to attract private capital. The Liberal budget calls for massive increases in government debt. Their plan is for the energy superpower, non-conventional, i.e. alternative energy. This is about transitioning away from fossil fuels. Most of the technology is unproven, so the government will take on this themselves. This is a non-market economy, the point I believe you have missed. Use Canadian tax dollars, jam through net zero, utilize components from China, cram it all down our throats, build up that carbon credit business. Brookfield gets rich. Mark Carney's $7 million of stock options. Kaboom, through the roof. Next up, we got Doug Ford trying to fearmonger some more. Is he trying to help Mark Carney? What's he doing here?
Because over the last few months, we've all seen the turmoil and chaos that have resulted from President Trump's tariffs and the economic uncertainty he has created. There's one person that's causing these problems. And let me assure you, folks, it's not the American people. I talk to the Americans every single day, and they totally disagree with what President Trump is doing. Not just to us, it's the entire world. He has put an attack on, an economic attack like we've never seen before. Yet
it's only China and Canada that have counter tariffs right now, and China and Canada are the only two countries who don't have the 90-day reprieve.
Trump supporters in the U.S. that I speak to, no matter if it's the governors or senators or Congress women and men, behind closed doors, they tell me they totally disagree. He has the lowest ratings right now in over 80 years, and you wonder why, right? You sit back and wonder why. He needs to wonder why, because he's the problem. We need to rethink collectively on how we're going to move forward on this. And it's forcing us to rethink how we protect our economy and our province. Because one thing is very clear, we can no longer rely on the United States. Instead, we need to make Ontario more self-reliant and more resilient.
He's sounding exactly like Mark Carney.
Because that is the best way to protect our province, protect First Nations communities from President Trump's tariffs and whatever else he has up his sleeve. We'll never roll over. We'll never, ever be the 51st state. And I can tell you, Canada will never be for sale, especially for anyone, but not President Trump.
I can tell you for certain, Doug Ford, you will never, ever be the federal leader of the Conservative Party. Doug Ford and Mark Carney are World Economic Forum buddies. I would suggest that the fear-mongering and the crisis creation are World Economic Forum rhetoric. Interesting. So going over to the Wayback Machine here for the World Economic Forum, we have Doug Ford listed here. He was removed back in 2022. One good thing coming from this election is we're starting to weed out who the real conservatives are and who these fake conservatives are, like Doug Ford and Tim Houston. Clean up this garbage, strengthen the party. We're going to build this back stronger and better, further pull in more support for the conservatives. The Liberals can only conjure this fear of Donald Trump once. This isn't going to work again, and this Carney minority government won't last forever.